Hello everyone. I am Ohiro Oni-Eseleh, and as it is always my pleasure to experience, I am today welcoming one special guest. Her name is Miss Schanica Pickens, who is a professor in one of the universities here in New York. And today we're going to be talking about her experience in academia, which some of those experiences I'm sure that we will share. Ms. Schanica Pickens is the director of the Master of Social Work program at High University here in the state of New York. And so, Professor Pickens, it's really my pleasure to welcome you.
And I most certainly welcome the pleasure. Thank you very much, Ohiro.
Right, and it's also Mother's Day, and I was wondering if you would actually just share with us a little how your day has been. Happy Mother's Day, by the way.
Thank you very much. And I actually want to extend a happy Mother's Day to all mothers, whether you're a biological mom, adoptive mom, God mom, or just, a caretaker, in general. Mothering, as we know, doesn't come with the manual, but certainly experience, teaches us best. And so, I'm proud to be a mom of a young Black boy who is 16 years old. And he has been, such a delight, and he gives me purpose to keep living and to keep pushing forward and to constantly, serve as a model and to enlighten him, empower him, and uplift him throughout his journey, in life.
Something just struck me there. You said a young Black boy. Why was that important?
Because our young Black boys get a bad rap. And I think it's significant of the times that we're in right now. I want to give credence to who he is as an individual and recognize his positionality in this world, and to understand that he is a rising king. And the same way that I respect him as a young Black male, he's to walk with that and expect for others to also do the same, recognizing that there's a time and place for everything, and he will be met with some challenges, but I want him to know who he is and that it's okay for him to stand for something. And first and foremost, standing in the shoes of a young Black male is integral. And that he does not have to change who he is for anyone except for how he view himself. And I believe that that starts in the home.
Well, Professor Pickens, I think that that's a completely different conversation that we can have, because I'm not sure that people who are not in my skin color or your skin color have to make such intentional decisions that you are describing. Because, and I think that people look at us, yes, and they think of us as successful people, but they don't realize that very often we still have to be intentional in the things that we do. So I am not sure if you want to speak just a little bit more about that, because I think that, for example, when a Black child gets killed by a cop, it almost feels like we have all been killed, doesn't it?
Absolutely.
And
absolutely.
Right, and we're talking at a time now when little Richard just died. He just died yesterday, and we know that his musical exploits and the things that he created and all of the glory he could have had, much of that was denied him because of his skin color. That was then.
Right.
But it just strikes me that even today, we're still making decisions that are influenced by the Black experience in this country.
For sure. And Hero, to add to that, we also have the Trayvon Martins, right? We also have most recently the young man, Aubrey, who was killed jogging. And so we're constantly having to contend with what's promoted in the media, the perceptions of us as persons of color, Black being in particular, and I'm being very explicit about being a Black woman and being a Black man, having to survive in this world, because unfortunately we as people have yet to get to the place of being able to live within this world. And so, yesterday I decided to go power walking in honor of Ahmaud Arbery, and that I had to consider who I was, right? And first and foremost, it was, I am a Black woman who reside in a predominantly Jewish community. And I had to make a decision if I wanted to wear a mask, because of course, we're in the midst of COVID. And so, the governor's guidelines is that, everyone should wear masks. But as I had to consider walking these streets, which many folks deem as safe in my community, I'm surrounded by synagogues. I'm surrounded by, secondary education schools, which are primarily for, Jewish individuals. And there are a speck of us, Black folks, that reside within this community. So it is deemed to be diverse. But I had to make an executive decision whether or not I was going to take that walk and wear a mask. And I decided not to wear the mask because I was fearful that I would be mistaken for. And I was cognizant about the fact that I'm actually going to walk just an hour because I want to get back into my home to be with my son. And so when we have to grapple with just walking outside and having to survive within a culture that is just so embedded with racism, discrimination, stereotypes, it really places a daunting experience on our lives. And it almost stunts us from being able to be our true selves, right? And so I literally power walked because I needed to hurry up and get what I needed to do in and hurry up back home. And it wasn't until I reached my home where I was able to give a sigh of relief to say, I'm back home in a place that I deem safe, and I get to go in that room and see my son. And so once that happened, again, feeling much better about it, but my heart is still pained about all of our young Black men and women, because we're not exempt whatsoever. And so I am clear about the fact that I am a young Black woman who have to work 10 times harder than my white counterparts. I am clear that while my son does attend a diverse secondary institution, he's in the 11th grade, but I'm constantly having to remind him that he too have to work harder and work smarter because he can't do, he can't say, and get away with things that many of his counterparts may. And to add to that, he has an educated parent. He has a mother who works within the higher education sector. He has a mother who has a bachelor's and master's, education, similar to that of the folks who are teaching him within his institution. And oftentimes he uses that to navigate his way through. So when he has to encounter one of his teachers belittling him or speaking down to him or targeting him for whatever reason, he informs them that his mother is a professor. His mother is an administrator within a higher ed institution. He recognizes that it changes the conversation, right? It shifts their tone. And then it becomes, oh, wow, I didn't realize that, because while the community in which we reside is predominantly Jewish, the teachers from his school are primarily from Long Island, New York, traveling into the city. For Rockaway, Queens, where I reside, is considered a community of low socioeconomic status. And so many times their experience is that of having to interface and interact with those who they stigmatize as ghetto, right? It's a marginalized community. And so there's so many resources that are not provided. Me being an educated woman, I'm resourceful. And so I know how to tap into those various avenues and conduits to access those resources, right? I'm a social worker by trade. And so my skill set lends itself to advocacy, right? Training, social justice, humanity. And so I employ those same skill sets, whether it's in my home, whether it's in my full-time job, as well as lend that expertise and knowledge to those who lack it. And so my son is able to navigate through some of these issues more so than a lot of his peers, because they're not equipped with the same tools. And so oftentimes I'm finding myself having to outreach to their parents, right? Having to inform them of what their rights are, right? Being able to link them to various resources that's going to afford them opportunity. And so when I can empower and uplift these individuals, my job is done. However, it's never ever fully done because there's always more work to do. Now, I will also say for myself, some of the challenges that I interface is the fact that I am an educated woman. And so oftentimes I'm met with microaggressions. And I'll give you a prime example. I don't believe you actually attended NYU for your graduate program. How did they let you in? Right? Who did you know? right? And I then have to challenge that because I didn't know anyone, right? I got in because I applied to the institution, right? I had to fight for my right to be within that institution. And so oftentimes people's perception of me is that I come from this gated community, that I am from Long Island because I sound white, I speak proper, and when they learn that I am from Far Rockaway, Queens, they are shocked. I've gone to interviews where they thought you would pronounce my name as Schanica or Sohanica, but my name is pronounced Schanica. And again, I get, oh, wow, you don't look like what your resume reads. I wouldn't have never thought. Or they'll say, aren't you a little young to be in a higher level position? I'm really surprised that, you know, you're at where you're at so quickly in your journey. And so, you know, so I'm constantly swinging, to be honest with you. I find myself constantly having to swing because I need to help people to demystify some of these things that they're thinking, right? Their perceptions. So
it's weird. You know, I was laughing because many years ago, someone, you know, a colleague at work asked me, it was many years ago, asked me if I got into a doctoral program as a result of affirmative action. At first, I thought he was joking, and then I realized he was actually curious because he would like to get into a PhD program. And he wasn't, I don't know if he had applied before, was rejected or what, but he asked me that question. And once I realized it was serious, I looked at him and I said, here is what I tell people like you. If you think you're better than I am because of your skin color and my skin color, first you have to beat me at what I do. And I haven't met people like you who have beaten me at anything that I do. So until you can beat me at what I do, you should never ask me that question. And of course, he apologized, but that's the reality. I can really relate to what he's saying. And it's interesting because we have actually already taken many steps in this conversation. And I'm just curious how you're being Black and being a Black woman translates in your role in academia. And I ask that question also cognizant of the fact that women, regardless of their skin color, also face significant discrimination in various parts of this country and even in academia. So there must be a difference or some differences in the experience, in the experiences that you have as a Black person, as a Black woman, from what your experiences might be as a white person or a white woman. Because I do not believe that it's all about merit. And even in academia, we all know that it's not always all about merit. So I am curious to know what has been good and what has been challenging in academia for you? Because it turns out that you're the director of a Master of Social Work program in a predominantly white university, in a very white university.
Very white.
Right.
Right. Absolutely. So I'll tell you, you know, I think sometimes the unfortunate circumstances is where you find the silver lining, right? And so oftentimes I really do try and operate from a strength-based perspective. And so I'm going to start with saying that my experience has been quite complex. And the reason why I'm starting from that place is because as I consider when I first began at this particular institution in the role or the position of student affairs coordinator, it was part-time, 17 hours per week. But my interview process, I kept asking, like, why was it so expensive? I'm accustomed to group interviews. I'm accustomed to, you know, having, you know, one-on-one interviews. But I was trying to understand, why did it take 4 different interviews for this part-time 17-hour position? And it quickly dawned on me the environment in which I was entering. And even throughout that process, I had to justify, I had to prove that the qualifications that I was coming in with were mine. It wasn't something that someone gave me. It wasn't anything that I just threw on a piece of paper to you know, critique myself, and that I had a skill set, you know, and objectives that were made up. And so throughout my interview process, I kept pushing that these are skills that I honed, right? This is indeed who I am. And I'm a firm believer in taking me everywhere I go. And so the person that you see today, whether it's at Walmart, whether it's at my place of employment, or even if it's at a lounge, I am always my professional self. And having to break the wall in helping these individuals understand that I am professional, and I've worked in professional environments, which in turn, and as I look back, actually made me more equipped and probably overqualified for that role. But I wanted to work in academia because I also recognized the shift that God was making in my life. And so God led me into higher education. God has led my destiny to the position in which I hold now. But even with that comes complexity, because I am a Black woman. And I've been having to navigate, you know, microaggressions, being marginalized, being discriminated against, you know, being discounted for numerous positions for many years because of racism. I also had to learn to not internalize that. But I also realized that I developed an hyper-awareness to it. So when folks ask me what have been my learning curve, it has been such that I've developed an hyper-awareness. I am clear at academe, is not my safe home. And I'm not sure if it ever will be my safe home, because in academia, there's what I refer to as a homelessness against Blacks, right? The hiring process is not as many persons of color, you know, within predominantly white institutions. And the institution in which I'm employed, certainly there's a handful of us within these higher level positions. And we fight hard to get there. We fight hard to maintain our position. We fight hard to find our voice within academia. I am 10 years in, and for the past 2 years, I have finally found my voice. Now, some may ask, why is that? And I would attribute that to the fact that I was made to know my positionality as being Black and as being a woman. So when I consider the gender dynamics and how I had to manage being a Black female professional and the stereotypes that was associated with that, being the mad, angry Black woman, being considered mean, being considered cold, we don't belong. And that in my position, I'm ought to be grateful because I was handed a favor, right? So, Black woman, you keep your mouth shut. You just be glad that you were hired, that you are a part of this culture, which is considered privilege. So I had to recognize that I was operating from a place of privilege, and I had to accept the gendered dynamics because I wanted to be accepted, right? I wanted to, not be an outcast because I had to be grateful. And so these past 2 years, I'm now operating from a place of, I know my superpowers, right? I am very clear of my positionality and how I came to be and who I am versus who I am trying to be. And so I struggled for a really long time having to make that distinction in terms of who I am and who I am trying to be, because who I am is Schanica Pickens, a Black woman that, grew up, in an area of low socioeconomic status, went on to attain her education, have done very well for herself, is raising, a young Black boy to working in an environment where it's white. And I have to try to assimilate to their culture of whiteness to be accepted. So I was stifled. I wasn't able to develop in terms of my professional self because I was always reminded that I wasn't qualified the same way my white counterparts were qualified. If you put my resume next to one of my white counterpart resumes, I blow them out the water, right? When I consider my knowledge base, and accolades that I receive for being able to relate to students of color, being able to mentor students of color, being able to support, white students and have the respect of those very same students, and have skill sets that they're trying to acquire and which I've already gained, but yet my openness to learning is continuous. That is intimidating for so many. And so it comes with uneasiness as well. It can be very uncomfortable at times because me being a Black woman, I am considered diversity, right? Me being hired in a position within mid-management, the university has met the diversity quota. And again, because of such, I'm ought to be grateful. I'm to deem this as an honor, and I have to keep my mouth shut. But those days are long gone. I'm very grateful for anything and everything. I'm grateful for being here with you today, Ohiro. I'm grateful for being able to speak on this topic that I have shelved for so many years now. I'm able to speak on this topic because I found my voice. And so, having relational skills and also being able to navigate within the same environment and find pockets where I can gain mentorship, I can enter spaces and be able to utilize my voice and not have to question, who I am is very significant for me.
Right. And I think that so too is the ability to recognize those intersectionalities about which you have spoken and to recognize them in yourself. So I know that in your role, you see a lot of young students of color. My question then is, how do you use all of this experience, that all of these things that have made you, how are you able to then use them to guide the students that come to you?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I'm a firm believer in exploration and discovery. And so when I meet with students, I tend to tap into who they are and get them to really to tune in into their very own self-awareness. I'm all about empowerment. And so I start each and every conversation, regardless of what the situation may be, whether it's a student that's on academic probation, a student that might be dismissed from the program, a student who is inquiring about the program, a student who is exploring, their personal self. It's about positive delivery. And so I always preface my conversations with welcoming them. I preface my conversations by asking them to tell me who they are and what are their needs and what goals and aspirations do they have. No one had ever asked me those questions. Oftentimes, people tell you what you are, what you're going to do, what's going to happen, how it's going to happen, and why it happened. I'm more about, let's explore who you are. Let's try and figure out, how did you get to this place and what do you need in order to propel forward? I am a representation of them. And if I am going to serve as a representation, then I want to be that of positivity. I'm going to posit life into students and anyone whom I interact with, because I don't want them to feel that sense of homelessness within a place that they should call home in an institution. And so if I can create that dynamic for them and help guide that process, then that's where I see my purpose, right? And my purpose is driven by the energy that they bring to me. And then the energy that I'm able to put outwards and instill in them.
You know, this is a very powerful conversation, and I wish we could just continue. And I'm sure that we could do that for hours upon hours, which means that you have to promise to come back.
I would love to come back.
And we will have that. We'll schedule it for you to come back. So right now, I just want you to give us some final words. And I want these words to be around young students who right now are considering what they're going to do with their lives. Those who are already in college, who are facing the same situation that we all face right now, where the world is in a very uncertain situation. There is fear, there is anxiety. And in the midst of that, students who we don't really talk about, who are still going through the process of trying to find their own identities. Those are the students that I want you to speak to in closing. The young people.
Oh, goodness. Again, there's so much that I can say, but I'm going to start with this. Love thyself first. Once you love who you are and you begin to understand who you are, you begin to be able to navigate into various entities, various spaces. You have to accept who you are. But within acceptance, you're finding yourself. And one of the things I often tell my son, and he's young, he's 16 years old, is that in life, sometimes we lose ourselves to find ourselves. So for the young person that is trying to find a home, a family, right, that may gravitate to game and violence, I'm going to say to that young person, while I am sensitive to having to fill a void, but you still have purpose. Your purpose is going to drive your passion. You don't have to accept a quality of life that is subpar. Loving yourself allows for you to feel qualified. You don't have to have others qualify you. None of us are perfect. And matter of fact, I wouldn't even strive for perfection, because living and learning is continuous. So you take the cards that you dealt with and you turn that around and make it work for you. And making it work for you can lead you in so many directions. When I started, in the field of social work, I wasn't clear that that's what I wanted to do. But my path along my journey have made it clearer and clearer. People whom I interacted with have made it clearer and clearer. For those who don't have positive relationships with their parents, right, with whomever their caretaker is, try and find a place in your heart where you can consider, even if it's just an ounce, of what does family look like to you? What exactly are you gaining from these relationships? And try and put it into some perspective. You know, I can only, consider the mindset as it stands now while we're in the midst of COVID. And many of our young people are having to do without their formal graduations, having to deal with not being able to participate in a prom. And I'm imagining how daunting that is, and the mental stress that it may bear on some of our young folks. But even in the midst of that, I'm going to ask all of you young folks to push forward. If your desire is to go to college, and of course we don't know what the future is going to hold in terms of whether or not we remain, virtual learning or online learning or distance learning, whichever way, we've referenced that. But don't put life on hold, because time waits for no one. And when you have folks who perceive you as perfect, who perceives you as having the best of everything, also inform them that they may see the glory, but they don't know your story. And so oftentimes I'm perceived in certain ways. And I'm very clear to let folks know that I experience adversities. I've experienced disappointments. I bleed just like everyone else does. I have feelings just as everyone else does. And so don't allow people to paint this glorious, walk or your journey for you without you having a say-so in your own walk in life. Because if you believe what you do is what's right for you, then that means it is okay to inform people. Now, I'm not a religious person, but I am a spiritual person. And so I'm going to say, put God first. God doesn't steer us wrong. God knows our hearts, and God is going to guard our hearts. And so he is not going to put any more on you than you can bear. And so if you remain steadfast, and if you're a believer, then continue to put your trust in him. When you put your trust in him, the gates open, and they open wide. And while we don't always understand what's happening for us, sometimes it's not meant for us to understand in that moment, but we do gain clarity. So, young folks, in conclusion, love who you are, be who you are, walk your destiny, believe in a higher power, and live life to the fullest, because time waits for no one.
Thank you very much. I think that no better words have been spoken to end a conversation like this. So I'm really grateful that you stopped by, and I I have taken your word as a promise to be kept, that you'll be back and we'll have more of this conversation, because we have really only just scratched the surface.
Absolutely.
There is still a lot to talk about. And so I'm really grateful that you came, Schanica. Thank you very much, and we'll be talking.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Be well.
Bye-bye. You have just watched my interview with Ms. Schanica Pickens. Now that you have done that, I urge you to subscribe to my channel on YouTube. And after you've done that, please log on to www.ruminationsblog.org and read my blog articles. And after you have done that, please just Google Ruminations with Ohiro Oni-Eseleh, or go to your Apple podcast, iTunes, or go anywhere. Just Ruminations with Ohiro Oni-Eseleh, and listen to my podcasts. As you heard, Ms. Pickens and I only just scratched the surface. I promise to continue to bring you great content, because there is a lot in our world to talk about. And I look forward to seeing you here regularly. Thank you.